Assalamu alaikum students. Welcome to Virtual University's class on Production and Operation Management. My name is Marif Suhail and today we'll discuss the important concepts of competitiveness, strategy and productivity. The way this lecture has been designed is that first of all we'll define the three terms, then we'll talk about the way the businesses compete. We'll also list some of the reasons why organizations fail because of poor competitiveness. Then we'll move on to the concept of strategy. And after defining strategy and discussing various types of strategy, we'll try to set up a comparison between organizational strategy and operational strategy. We'll then talk about the examples related to time-based strategies. In addition, we will also try to formulate an operation strategy. And when we'll be formulating an operation strategy, what we'll try to do is that we'll take into account both the manufacturing side as well as the services side. After that, we'll move on to the concept of productivity. And when we'll be discussing productivity, we'll try to list some of the reasons why organizations perform poorly. In other words, what we'll try to do is that we'll try to decipher the reasons why poor productivity affects an organization. We'll also try to develop some examples which would help us in better understanding both the competitiveness as well as productivity. We may also include some workable examples from the strategy side as well. So just for the sake of easy reference, we'll first of all visit the definitions of competitiveness, strategy, and productivity. As we all know through our earlier discussions in our management and marketing classes, that these three important concepts, even if taken separately, can convey a lot to a student of business. But today's lecture has been designed in a way that we'll look into these three concepts with the lens of production operation management. So first of all, let's try to define what competitiveness is. आप लोग competitiveness को marketing side में as well as management side में पहले देख चुके हैं. Competitiveness is the willingness to compete against your rivals. यानी अगर आप किसी भी सर्विस साइड या मैन्युफैक्चरिंग साइड को रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं एंड यू आर वर्किंग इन एन इंडस्ट्री, चाहे आप एग्जांपल के तौर पे ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री को ले लीजिए, चाहे आप केमिकल प्लांट को ले लीजिए, या आप फर्टिलाइजर बिजनेस को ले लीजिए, या आप बैंकिंग सर्विसेज साइड को ले लीजिए, you would always be having a competition. You already know from your previously gathered knowledge from economics that even though there might not be a perfect competition, but there is never a possibility of a monopoly as well. So you would always have some other organizations working in the same industry or field with the same set of objectives. उसके बाद, what is strategy? Strategy आप जानते हैं has a lot more to do with the long-term planning. We look into it कि long-term planning से हम क्या मुराद लेते हैं, या for that matter what type of objectives can we set up in our long-term strategy. Then again, people often talk about tactics while discussing strategy. We'll try to differentiate कि tactics और strategy में क्या फर्क होता है. And then finally we'll talk about productivity. Productivity, as the name indicates, has a lot more to do with the concept of output to input. It is, of course, the utilization of resources. and we'll try to take a deeper look into the way how we can calculate this index. And as we would come across a number of examples, we'll be surprised that the concepts of productivity have often been overlooked. This unfortunately has led to a lot of organizations being termed a failure. And in fact, we now look into the reasons why an organization fails. Most of the time, organizations fail because they are looking at a very short-term objective. What would be that short-term objective? The objective that comes readily to our mind would be that we are trying to go for profitability at the expense of either quality or productivity. A number of organizations have failed to achieve profitability even though they try to cut their cost. Cost cutting naturally is misperceived as the reason for your profit maximization. But unfortunately, it never happens. All those organizations, or if not all, most of the organizations which opted for cost cutting in the form of laying off their workforce or shutting down their plants, registered an even worse future outlook afterwards. They registered far more diminishing returns on investment after carrying out the activity of cost cutting. Another reason why organizations fail is because of the organization's inability to take care of the business in terms of its strengths. देखा ये गया है कि most of the organizations, when they are working against their rivals, tend to emulate or imitate or follow their rival's strategy. And while doing so, they have the tendency to overlook their strength, and they, as a result, are playing on the favorite ground of their rivals. यानी अगर आपके competitor ने cost cutting की एक strategy अपनाई है, और वो cost cutting की strategy से इस वजह से अपनाई गई है कि वो price war के जरिए आपको market से बेदखल करके अपनी प्रोडक्ट इंट्रोड्यूस करा रहा है, तो देयर आर चांसेस दैट वो क्वालिटी से कॉम्प्रोमाइज कर रहा होगा. दिस डिस्कशन कैन बी एक्सटेंडेड टू दैट डायमेंशन एज वेल, एंड वी वुड बी डूइंग दैट इन आवर फ्यूचर लेक्चर्स, बट फॉर द sake of easy reference, today we'll just try to say that an organization can fail if it fails to achieve its prime objective, that is, to maximize profit on the base of its core competency or strength. Often organizations fail when they do not take into account the competitive threats, like an organization working in the automobile industry may not be willing to check whether their rivals are planning to introduce a new automobile feature in their next model. In fact, this lack of customer relationship management can lead to a complacency, which generates as a result, a natural result, the inability to innovate. This is a very important concept, and we probably would be looking into it in our middle of the semester. Then, most importantly, as we are discussing operations management, most of the companies tend to ignore their operation strategy. What happens is that they end up employing non-productive strategies. What would be non-productive strategies for any manufacturing side? I guess the best example would be what happened in the United States. In the early 1980s, as well as in the early 1990s, there was a rude shock to the American automobile manufacturers. The reason was that they did not have any clear-cut operation strategy. They were focused on the financial strategy or the marketing strategy, thereby overlooking the basic intent if you are into manufacturing or services, you should have a proper and practical operation strategy. Unfortunately, in case of the American automobile manufacturers, they did not have that opportunity. Another reason why organizations fail is that they often place too much emphasis in their product and service design. Meaning, instead of looking into the actual overall big picture, which would be to provide services to the customer, the organizations have the tendency that they get involved in the product as well as the service design. Like instead of introducing innovation, they tend to create it a bit more subjective, यानी objectivity lose कर दी. अगर हम दोबारा अमेरिकन ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री के एग्जाम्पल को टेकअप करें of the 1980s, what was happening? The Americans were not ready to accept the Japanese philosophy, which was कि आप इंक्रीमेंटल चेंज ला सकते हैं, आपका मॉडल गाड़ी का बुनियादी बेशक एक रहे, लेकिन एडिशनल फीचर्स ऑफ डिफरेंशिएशन can help you to improve your product and service. Unfortunately, they were working on the same plan, which was कि जी हम अपनी पुरानी ही मॉडल को कंटिन्यू करेंगे और 4 साल के बाद या 5 साल के बाद अपने कस्टमर को एक नया प्रोडक्ट प्रेजेंट करेंगे. That concept might have worked in the 1950s or in the 1960s when the Japanese were not functioning as a rival in the American market. ये बहुत important concept. And another offshoot of this problem is that the organization, again whether it's in production side or in the services side, can neglect its human or capital resource. Again, the reason being the same. अगर आपको ओवरऑल बिग पिक्चर क्लियर नहीं है, यू टेंड टू इग्नोर योर ऑपरेशन साइड. हम लोगों ने अपने पहले लेक्चर में देखा था दैट वॉट एवर मे बी द रीजंस, द 3 डिविजन्स फाइनेंस, मार्केटिंग एंड ऑपरेशंस वुड ऑलवेज मूव हैंड इन हैंड इन ऑर्डर टू अचीव द ऑर्गेनाइजेशनल ऑब्जेक्टिव. इधर क्या हो रहा है कि ऑर्गेनाइजेशन क्यों फेल हो रही है? बिकॉज इट्स जस्ट नॉट रेडी to accept the idea that by neglecting their human resources, यानी उनको आप ट्रेन ना करें, उनको आप मोटिवेट ना करें या आप उनको रिटेन ना करें, तो you are giving an opportunity to your rivals कि जी ये वर्कफोर्स को आप ही हायर कर लीजिए at a higher salary, and their trained workforce can probably create a lot more problems for you. Another reasons why organizations fail in achieving their objective is often they do not have a system of internal communication. For the reference, we can again relate to the American automobile industry of the 1980s. The American automobile industry faced the Japanese challenge and could not compete against the Japanese effectively because American hierarchy of the organization never permitted the worker to give information to its manager. जबकि इसके बरक्स Japanese philosophy of management says that through the implementation of quality circles, you can allow your frontline worker to initiate a change or make a suggestion or a recommendation even in the change of the design. And this thing led to a lot of increase in the productivity of the Japanese automobile side as well as electronic side as well as other industries, as well as introduce the concept of practicality of total quality management. Another important reason which probably sums it all is that most of the organizations fail because they do not register that the customer is interested in their product only and only if it satisfies its needs and wants. This total disregard to customer relationship management often leads to a lot of problems. अब हमने प्रॉब्लम्स की बात कर ली, वी हैव सेट अप अ बाउंड्री लाइन, तो एक नेचुरल कॉन्सिक्वेंस ये है कि हाउ कैन ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस compete then? बात सिर्फ इतनी सी है कि ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस कैन compete quite easily if they take into account the idea and the principles of competitiveness. Fine. But the idea of competitiveness requires that we need to now define how organizations can compete against each other. There are a number of factors. To make a formal start, we can take up the concept of price. It's logical to say that price is the basic defining factor. Why? Because lower price of any product or service would attract the attention of potential customers. यानी लोअर प्राइस के जरिए एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन अपनी मार्केट बेस या कस्टमर बेस को इंक्रीज कर सकती है. बट दिस इज वन स्मॉल पार्ट. आपकी प्राइस के साथ प्रोडक्ट की क्वालिटी भी ऐसी होनी चाहिए दैट द कस्टमर शुड कम बैक टू यू. सो नेचुरल कॉन्सिक्वेंस ऑफ प्राइस वुड बी क्वालिटी. You should have a proper trade-off between price and quality. And most of the successful organizations have been able to achieve that. Another way by which organizations can compete against each other is that you can create a differentiation concept in your product or service. Let me take the most easiest example possible. We'll refer to the automobile industry again. What is happening? If you have an automobile of 1300 cc capacity and I've got the automobile of same capacity with me, there should be a difference. A product differentiation concept should exist between these two automobiles. What would be that difference? Simple. We might be having the same kind of quality as well as safety as well as reliability features. But if there is a concept of price involved in it, then whoever has paid less for that automobile would probably say that I paid a less price for this. And my car's quality is quite superior to yours, and more importantly, I spend a less amount of money on the fuel. So these kind of product differentiations can make your product or service look great in comparison to your rivals product or service. यानी अगर आप ऑटोमोबाइल की बात कर रहे हैं तो पता ये चलता है कि आपकी गाड़ी में इलेक्ट्रॉनिक फ्यूल इंजेक्शन की प्रोडक्ट डिफरेंशिएशन इन्वॉल्व हुई हुई है, जिसकी वजह से आपकी कंजम्पशन भी बेहतर है और जो फ्यूल का एग्जॉस्ट है वो भी गवर्नमेंट ऑफ पाकिस्तान की रिकमेंडेड स्टैंडर्ड्स को मीट करता है. Another reason how organization can compete against its rival is if it pays a lot more attention to the concept of time. What do we mean by the concept of time over here? Time is another important dimension by which organizations can compete against their rivals. यानी अगर गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से कोई ऐसी रेगुलेशन आती है that any automobile manufacturer, चाहे वो शहर लाहौर में हो चाहे वो कराची में हो, if they are not in a position to introduce the additional feature of a global positioning device, then the government may not allow the automobile manufacturer to market that product or automobile. तो ऐसे कंडीशन में if your organization is not in a position to introduce that feature within time, और आप ये भी कह सकते हैं कि अगर आप थोड़ा सा मजीद जेनरिक किस्म की स्ट्रेटजी को अपनाएं तो आपकी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन if it does not possess that ability to train its workforce, to equip those particular device in the automobile, then again there's a problem. Why? Because your rival may have the same situation, may be facing the same situation but has the ability to introduce that feature in a shorter period of time. तो हमने देखा that why organizations fail. We also decided to come up with a remedial strategy or tactic, which was to define the boundaries how organizations compete against each other. यानी अगर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन अपने राइवल्स के मुकाबले में आना चाहती हैं तो वो क्या क्या चीजें या क्या क्या डायमेंशंस को टेक अप कर सकती हैं. वन ऑफ देम वाज प्राइस, द अदर वन वाज क्वालिटी, द थर्ड वन वाज प्रोडक्ट डिफरेंशिएशन एंड द फोर्थ वन वाज फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी एंड देन अगेन वी टॉक्ड अबाउट टाइम. अब हमारी जो डिस्कशन है वो एक लॉजिकल फ्लो में जाते हुए बढ़ते हुए हमें एक ऐसी स्टेज पे ले गई है दैट वी नीड टू डिफाइन competitiveness with respect to our field of production and operation management. Competitiveness क्या है? Competitiveness is the allocation of resources to obtain the organization's long-term objective in the most efficient and effective of ways. हमने कुछ देर पहले भी बात की थी कि it is in reality the aggressiveness of the organizations to compete against their rivals. But in reality, if you are in the business of providing a service or a product to your customer, what are you aiming for? Actually, there are two parts to this question. The first part is simple. You are trying to provide value, and we talked about what is value in our earlier lectures. Or in other words, we are saying that we are trying to provide value to our customers. The second part of the answer is also branching off from the first part. यानी जो वैल्यू है वो आप किस तरह से कस्टमर को प्रोवाइड कर सकते हैं. वैल्यू इज एक्चुअली द रेशियो ऑफ परफॉर्मेंस टू कॉस्ट. नाउ दिस परफॉर्मेंस इज अ complex term over here. Why? Because the customer can measure performance in terms of speed, flexibility, or quality, or all three taken together. In most of the cases, organizations, when they are providing a service or a product to its customer, they are working in a way that they should have a proper kind of trading or trade-off between quality, speed and flexibility. The organization ऐसा नहीं करेगी that it would provide a quality product but at a speed which is not acceptable to the customer. Similarly, the organization may not be able to compete against its rivals if it provides a service or product without any flexibility. That organizations let their marketing division or marketing side carry out a survey, and according to that survey they make their products. यानी अगर एक ऑटो इंडस्ट्री से हम दोबारा करते हैं, if an organization decides to market its product in this city and it fills out a questionnaire और उनको ये पता चलता है कि इस जगह के जितने भी लोग हैं वो ये कहते हैं कि हमें जो भी आप गाड़ी दीजिए उसमें CNG के एडिशनल फीचर जरूरी है, और वो ये देखते हैं कि ये फीचर वो प्रोवाइड कर सकते हैं एट अ वेरी लो एक्सपेंडिचर, they would probably do that. But if they also are told that हम लोगों को एडिशनल फीचर के तौर पे GPS डिवाइस भी चाहिए, और वो अगर उस चीज को ओवरलुक कर देते हैं तो चांसेस ये हैं कि दिस lack of flexibility on their part can reflect in a poor customer base and the customers can say कि जी हम आपकी जगह किसी और से प्रोडक्ट ले लेते हैं. अब जब आपने खुद ही ये कंडीशन बता दिया तो इम्पोर्टेंट कॉन्सेप्ट ये रह जाता है कि हाउ कैन ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस बी मोर competitive with respect to their rivals. There are 3 parts to it again. हम लोगों ने पहले भी बात की थी कि ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के 3 फंक्शनल डिविजन्स या 3 फंक्शनल डिपार्टमेंट्स होते हैं. सबसे पहला डिवीजन या पार्ट would be the marketing side, which is the front end of the organization. The second one being the finance side, and the third one being the operations side. अब ये बहस तलब बात है, but most of the time the organizations are created in a way that even if they're providing services, the marketing side would probably be in a position to collect the data from the customer, and the finance side should be able to provide that important glue of information that keeps the organization together, and more importantly, the operations side would be in a position to work according to the plans or information gathered by both finance as well as by the marketing side. तो अगर हम ये बात करें कि एक organization can be more competitive as compared to its rival in terms of marketing, तो उसके लिए ज़रूरी होगा कि हम marketing strategies या marketing tactics को employ करें. अब वो क्या marketing strategies हो सकती हैं? Well, a number of things. You can have like a product or a service at a lower cost, or you can have a situation where you can provide additional services at a lower cost. But for that particular strategy or tactic, you need your marketing side to use advertising as well as promotional activities. ये तो marketing की बात हो गई. There is another important concept कि जब आप फाइनेंस की बात करते हैं तो यू कैन बी competitive as compared to your rival if you religiously follow certain tactics or strategies. फाइनेंस में तो हमेशा बात ही ये होती है कि आपकी अगर कंपनी या ऑर्गेनाइजेशन is in a position to generate some financing in a way that increases the wealth of the investor, you can be more competitive to your rival. But ये तो एक साइड थी. मैंने आपसे कुछ देर पहले अर्ज किया था कि organizations in America were more focused on marketing as well as finance strategies, and thereby they overlooked the operational strategies. अब अगर आप operational strategies को overlook कर रहे हैं, there are chances that you'll end up paying a heavy price in the form of losing a customer or in the form of creating a declining return on investment. तो हम जब production operation की बात कर रहे हैं, how can a business can gain competitive advantage over its rivals? Well, there are a number of reasons. If you are in a position to attain competitive advantage over your rival, you can create your product and service design with certain features which are favorable to your customer and are not easily replicable by your rivals. यानी ऐसे features जो एक अगर एडिशनल कॉस्ट पे भी आप इंट्रोड्यूस करा रहे हैं तो आपका राइवल वो मैच ना कर सके. ये तो बहुत ही फेवरेबल बात होगी. प्रोडक्ट एंड सर्विस डिजाइन के बाद वी ऑल्सो हैव द फीचर ऑफ कॉस्ट. आई रिस्पेक्ट योर ऑब्जर्वेशन. आप लोगों का बिल्कुल ठीक ये ख्याल है कि जब आप प्रोडक्ट सर्विस डिजाइन की बात करें या कॉस्ट की बात करें तो यू आर टॉकिंग अबाउट ट्रेडिशनल स्ट्रेटजीज. यस, कॉस्ट लीडरशिप may allow you to offer the product at a lower price or at an economical price. But this is certainly one of the important concepts which, if you are employing in your operation side, can increase your competitive advantage. Another important point is the concept of location. यानी अगर आप फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशन के तौर पे सर्विसेज प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं, you may set up different points of sales or points of locations for the convenience of your customer. If you are able to do that, I can assure you your operations side would probably attain competitive advantage against your rivals. और जब कभी आप कॉस्ट की बात करते हैं तो देयर इज ऑलवेज अ फेयर इन द माइंड्स ऑफ स्टूडेंट्स ऑफ ऑपरेशन मैनेजमेंट. मेरे साथ भी यही प्रॉब्लम है that I always fear that cost cutting may lead to a reduction in quality, but an organization can achieve competitive advantage over its rivals if it matches its price to its service. एक और point जो बहुत important है is that the organization should be able to provide quick response. Quick response से क्या मुराद है? आपसे कुछ देर पहले बात की गई कि अगर आपका राइवल कोई ऐसी एडिशनल सर्विस प्रोवाइड नहीं कर सका जो आप एक फेयर प्राइस के ऊपर कस्टमर को प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं, then you may have an additional advantage to you. But that competitive advantage is dependent upon the fact that your rival should not be able to replicate it. But what if he is in a position to do that in a much more improved way? यानी वो इतनी क्विक रिस्पॉन्स दिखाता है कि वो आपकी कंपैरेटिव एडवांटेज को कवर कर सके. इन दैट केस योर राइवल विल बी टर्म्ड एज एन एजाइल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन एंड इट्स एबिलिटी टू compete against you would be termed as agility. और ये बड़े इंपॉर्टेंट कॉन्सेप्ट्स हैं. जब हम लीन प्रोडक्शन की बात करेंगे तो वी मे बी टेकिंग अप दीज पॉइंट्स in more detail. Another important concept by which you can attain competitive advantage over your rivals is the concept of flexibility. पता ये चला आपकी मार्केटिंग साइड ने कहा कि हम लोग जो फाइनेंशियल सर्विस प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं उस फाइनेंशियल सर्विस में लोगों को जरा ज्यादा इंटरेस्ट है विद हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस एंड वी डू नॉट हैव द फैसिलिटी टू प्रोवाइड हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस. तो आपके पास इतनी फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी होनी चाहिए that you should be able to modify or mold or improve your service in a way that you are able to provide that. So when you are doing that, you are employing the concept of flexibility and you can improve your competitive advantage against your rivals. I think no discussion would be complete when you are talking about competitive advantage in terms of operations if we do not mention the concept of inventory. A good warehouse or materials manager or an operations manager would be the one who maintains a minimum safety stock level of its inventory. This is not limited to only a safety stock level. This also takes into account the idea of availability of critical spares. What are critical spares? Well, those spares which, if are not available to an organization, can seriously hamper its production ability or serviceability. We would be discussing it in our product and service design lecture later. Another important concept by which organizations can gain competitive advantage is the supply chain management concept. This is relatively a new concept. It's been there since the late 1980s, but it has gained prominence in Pakistan only in the late 1990s. And as an operation manager, if you are in a position to develop and sustain a strong link between your supplier and your customer, you would be working with a very strong supply chain philosophy, and that supply chain would help you to attain competitive advantage over your rivals. Sometimes the operation managers tend to overlook the idea of service. Unfortunately, service is one thing which, like quality, is built in within your product as well as your service. यानी सर्विस का मतलब ये नहीं है कि जी हम लोगों ने प्रोडक्ट बनाया, बहुत अच्छी ऑटोमोबाइल बनाई, लेकिन आफ्टर सेल सर्विस का कॉन्सेप्ट नहीं इंट्रोड्यूस कराया. यानी कस्टमर ने गाड़ी ली तो गाड़ी की जिम्मेदारी आप उसकी है. नहीं, ऐसी बात नहीं है. an organization would definitely need an after-sales services component attached to its operation side. In fact, जब आप बैक ट्रेस करते हैं किसी भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की एबिलिटी टू compete against its rival, the concept of service gains a lot more attention. Unfortunately, in our country, we have been unable to work on this idea. But luckily, times are changing. We are getting more educated on this concept, and we have learned that the business deal is never completed until the after-sales service part is also met. We may be able to provide the best sports goods, the best leather goods to a lot of potential customers in Europe as well as in the United States of America. But if we are unable to provide the after-sales service or the service link with our product, we may lose out to rivals which are offering inferior goods but have a better after-sales services. So, if you are competing against your rivals in terms of operations, you need to pay respect to all these ideas. In fact, as a matter of fact, in our future lectures, we will be taking up these important concepts as our operational strategies. तो अभी तक जो हमारी डिस्कशन हुई है वो competitiveness के हवाले से यहाँ तक पहुंच चुकी है that we need to define what is our strategy, what should be our strategy in terms of operations as well as organization. तो सबसे पहली बात तो यही है, we should be able to understand the difference between mission, mission statement, tactics, and more importantly, strategy. We often interuse these terms, लेकिन to a student of production operation management, there is a fine divide between these concepts. And we'll spend some time trying to identify the uniqueness of these terms. सबसे पहली बात तो यही है कि strategies are plans for achieving organizational goals. यानी आपके अगर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ने ये डिसाइड किया है that it's going to provide a healthcare service, तो आपकी एक strategy होनी चाहिए that how are you going to provide that organizational goal or how are you going to achieve that organizational goal. इसी से रिलेटेड एक और टर्म है जिसे हम मिशन कहते हैं. मिशन से मुराद ये है that we are trying to define or identify the reason for which we created this organization. यानी अगर आप हेल्थ केयर सर्विस की बात कर रहे थे तो हम बात ही ये करेंगे जी हम लोगों का मिशन ये है that we are going to provide health care services to the people of Pakistan at an economical rate or at an economical cost. Then if you're talking about your mission, you should also be able to identify the mission statement. This is a clear wording of the concept that what businesses are we providing or what businesses or services are we providing to our customers. Then people often talk about goals. Goals are those tangible targets which have been identified by your organization's senior management, whether at a short term or whether at a long term. You would always have a detailed scope of mission available to you, and that detailed scope of mission is actually your goal. We also have to have tactic concept available to us. Tactics or tactics are the methods and actions taken by organizations to achieve competence as well as competitive advantage over their rivals. And while doing so, the organization should be able to accomplish it. Strategies, both at its operational level as well as the organizational level. हम अपनी सहूलत की खातिर तमाम terminology of this concept, this important concept of strategy को एक छोटे से example की सूरत में देखते हैं. यानी if we are in a position to start an organization, we can formulate its strategy. यानी अगर आप बात कर रहे हैं कि एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की स्ट्रेटजी होनी चाहिए, उसका मिशन होना चाहिए, उसकी मिशन स्टेटमेंट होनी चाहिए, और उसके साथ साथ उसके लिए कोई टैक्टिक्स होनी चाहिए, तो वी कैन टेक अप द सिंपल एग्जांपल ऑफ एन ऑटोमोबाइल मैन्युफैक्चरर. ऑटोमोबाइल मैन्युफैक्चरर की स्ट्रेटजी क्या होगी? ही शुड बी क्लियरली इन अ पोजीशन टू आइडेंटिफाई कि वो क्या मिशन रखना चाहते हैं. ऑफ कोर्स मिशन यही होगा कि वो ऐसी ऑटोमोबाइल मैन्युफैक्चर करके मार्केट करे कि उसका कस्टमर उस ऑटोमोबाइल को ना सिर्फ पसंद करे बल्कि इस्तेमाल करे और उसको बाद में किसी और को रेकमेंड भी करे. सो अगर इस मिशन के तौर पे कंपनी काम कर रही है तो इसकी मिशन स्टेटमेंट शुड कैरी अ लॉट मोर टेंजिबल एस्पेक्ट इन इट्स स्टेटमेंट. यानी कोई ऐसी स्टेटमेंट कि हम आपको ऐसे सेट ऑफ व्हील्स प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं जिसके जरिए आप कहीं भी जा सकते हैं. इसी तरह से अब आपने मिशन की बात कर दी, आपने स्ट्रेटजी की बात कर दी, तो यू शुड बी हैविंग some kind of strategic plans available to you by which you can achieve the mission as well as the strategy. अब वो लॉन्ग टर्म भी हो सकते हैं, शॉर्ट टर्म भी हो सकते हैं, या मीडियम रेंज के भी हो सकते हैं. एंड फाइनली if you are talking about mission or strategy, you should be in a position to identify certain tactics. Tactics are those operational level decisions which, if incorporated in true spirit, can improve not only your competitiveness but would give an edge in achieving your strategies. Yani, if we are talking about an automobile manufacturer, the basic tactic or tactics would be to employ the concepts of quality management, so that he should be able to achieve competitive advantage over its rivals. अब डिस्कशन जब आपकी स्ट्रैटेजी की हो तो it would be more convenient to all of us अगर हम एक छोटा सा एग्जाम्पल टेक अप कर लें. This example is probably more oriented towards you as the student of virtual university. यानी अगर मैं एग्जाम्पल को एक स्टेटमेंट की सूरत में आपके सामने पेश करूं तो आई वुड से दैट यू आर अ स्टूडेंट ऑफ बिजनेस एट वर्चुअल यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ पाकिस्तान, एंड लाइक द रेस्ट ऑफ द स्टूडेंट्स यू वुड लाइक टू हैव अ करियर इन बिजनेस, हैव अ गुड जॉब एंड अर्न इनफ इनकम टू लिव कंफर्टेबली. अब इस स्टेटमेंट के ऊपर एज अ स्टूडेंट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन ऑपरेशन मैनेजमेंट यू कैन प्रॉब्ली work and identify the goal, the strategy, the tactics, as well as the operations dimensions. How can we do that? Simple. The more important idea in this statement would be, what is the mission? The mission for you would be to live a good life. That's the overall big objective. Now, taking one step down, what should be your goal? The goal would be a successful career and good income. Then, if somebody asks you कि जनाब इस गोल को या इस मिशन को अचीव करने के लिए आपकी स्ट्रैटेजी क्या होगी, तो आपका प्रॉम्प्ट रिस्पॉन्स होगा that I intend to obtain a business degree from virtual university. फिर आपसे अगर कोई साहब पूछते हैं कि जनाब टैक्टिक्स क्या होंगी, तो आप कहेंगे जी मैं कोई ऐसी बिजनेस फील्ड को आइडेंटिफाई करके सेलेक्ट करूंगा जिसमें ना सिर्फ मेरा इंटरेस्ट हो बल्कि मार्केट वैल्यू भी अटैच हो. फिर कोई अगर साहब आके आपसे पूछते हैं जनाब अच्छा आपने मिशन की भी बात कर दी, आपने गोल की भी बात कर दी, आपने स्ट्रैटेजी की भी बात कर दी, आपने टैक्टिक्स की भी बात कर दी, व्हाट नेक्स्ट? क्या आप कोई ऑपरेशनल स्ट्रैटेजी या ऑपरेशनल प्लान भी आइडेंटिफाई करेंगे? तो आप कहेंगे जी जनाब बिल्कुल, इसमें एक सीक्वेंस ऑफ एक्टिविटीज हैं जो मैं आइडेंटिफाई कर चुका हूँ. आई वुड फर्स्ट गो एंड रजिस्टर माई सेल्फ विद द रजिस्ट्रार. फिर जो भी रजिस्ट्रेशन का प्रोसेस हो जाएगा उसके बाद यू विल गो एंड बाय बुक्स, यू विल एनरोल फॉर योर क्लासेस, यू विल स्टडी, यू विल इंशाल्लाह ग्रेजुएट, apply for a job and
होपफुली you'll be accepted for a job. और इस तरह से आपने स्ट्रेटजी के कॉन्सेप्ट को इस एग्जाम्पल के जरिए कैप्चर कर लिया. You were able to identify the mission, you were able to identify the goal, you were able to identify the strategy, you were able to identify tactics as well as operations. तो आपने देखा कि हमारा जो आज का लेक्चर है वो कहाँ से स्टार्ट होके कहाँ तक पहुंचा. We have been able to identify the reasons why organizations fail. We have been able to identify how organizations can achieve competitiveness and attain competitive advantage. We also checked what are the important concepts relating to strategy. And now, before we complete today's lecture, we'll just try to take some important examples of strategy. सबसे important strategy जो किसी भी business student से आप discussion के दौरान सुनेंगे would be low cost strategy. With this strategy, the organization tends to achieve cost leadership. Another example of strategy would be scale-based strategy. यानी आप ऐसे critical value of scale को identify करें, economies of scale को identify करें जिसके जरिए आप critical mass या critical volume achieve करके अपने rivals को पीछे छोड़ सकते हैं. Another strategy is specialization. What is specialization? Specialization is that you identify certain specific characteristics and then you work within those specific characteristics. And another form of strategy is flexible operations. Why I'm trying to identify this at this moment is that if you are flexible in your operations, you can modify a design or service with respect to your customer's requirements within your accepted or within your infrastructural boundaries. Infrastructural boundaries are very important parameters. Often people talk about service strategies. Whenever you're talking about service strategies, you are trying to identify the minimum standard requirements which are actually being put forward to you by a customer. Again, there is a possibility that some of you would say कि जनाब आपने सारी बातें की, क्वालिटी की बात नहीं की. नहीं, we are going to talk about quality. High quality or quality based strategy is very important, and this is comparatively a newer concept. लेकिन जब आप बात करते हैं strategies की और ट्रेडिशनल स्ट्रेटजीज की बात करते हैं जिसमें कॉस्ट लीडरशिप एज वेल एज डिफरेंशिएशन स्ट्रेटजी आ जाती है, यू टेंड टू टॉक अबाउट कॉम्पिटेंसीज. सो आवर फाइनल टॉपिक ऑफ डिस्कशन फॉर टुडे वुड बी डिस्टिंक्टिव कॉम्पिटेंसीज. व्हाट आर डिस्टिंक्टिव कॉम्पिटेंसीज? द एट्रीब्यूट्स, द कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स or qualities that give you a competitive edge over your rivals are basically your competencies. अब इसमें हम अगले हफ्ते कौन कौन सी डायमेंशंस को देखेंगे. we'll talk about price, we'll talk about quality, we'll talk about time, we'll talk about flexibility, and we'll talk about service, and then finally we'll talk about location. So डियर स्टूडेंट्स, आज आपने जब प्रोडक्शन ऑपरेशन मैनेजमेंट में कंपैटिटिवनेस, स्ट्रैटेजी और प्रोडक्टिविटी के लेक्चर का आगाज किया तो आपने कई बातें सीखी. दिस इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कॉन्सेप्ट एंड वी वुड कंप्लीट दिस कॉन्सेप्ट इन आवर नेक्स्ट लेक्चर. इन आवर नेक्स्ट लेक्चर वी विल ट्राई टू कवर नॉट ओनली द strategies which are traditional in nature, but we'll try to formulate strategies for manufacturing side as well as services side. We'll also try to create a relationship between operational strategy as well as organizational strategy. And then we'll move on to the concept of productivity. when we'll be discussing productivity, we'll try to identify the reasons which lead to an organization's poor performance. We'll also try to come up with a remedial plan, which would be how an organization can improve its productivity. These are important concepts, and as a natural consequence, हम लोगों की अगली dimension ये होगी that we should be able to identify the process of decision making. So हमारा next lecture productivity strategy as well as decision making को take up करेगा. And after that, we'll be able to solve some examples from Pakistan's day-to-day routine matters with respect to the concepts of competitiveness, strategy, and productivity. Thank you very much.